challenge, week 16 to 18. Yay! All right, so week 16 says, what other religions influence or appeal to you? So I was raised if you see my other videos, you know I was raised in a very strict Catholic household, and while I am not Catholic and I'm not Christian, it does have a large influence on me. I cannot help it. That's the way I was raised. And so it has had an influence on me, and both, I think, positive and negative in some ways. I mean, there's certainly things about Catholicism I don't agree with, and about the church that I find to be negative. And then there's things I just don't believe. Like, it's neutral. I don't have a bad feeling about it, but I just don't believe it. But on the positive side, it definitely, especially in my artwork, has really influenced me. I use a lot of gold leaf, and a lot of my images tend to be religious images in my artwork. So it definitely, especially artistically, has influenced me a great deal. Also, I'm very comfortable with things like, it's not a big stretch going from like saints to deities. So I'm comfortable with ritual, I'm comfortable with candles and incense and all that kind of stuff, and having a religion that has a lot of imagery in it. So I'm very comfortable with those things, and so it has had a big influence on me. And also too, because of Mary, it's almost like I've always had a goddess in some ways anyway. And I still, you know, I certainly respect Jesus and Mary, and because they're part of, you know, I grew up in that tradition, but even though it's not my tradition anymore. So that has had a huge influence on me. As for other religions outside of that, I find Buddhism to be fascinating. I do like reading stuff about Buddhism and some of the tenets in there, things like, you know, this compassion and detachment and things like that. I always find very interesting. I don't necessarily, again, agree with everything, but I find it fascinating and interesting. I found Taoism interesting, and you know, like sort of that whole going with the flow and nonviolence and not pushing against the stream. I find that fascinating and interesting. And again, I don't know tons about those particular philosophies and religions, but the stuff I do really find interesting. You know, I have great respect for like the Dalai Lama. Certainly, so Buddhism, I think, has a lot of influence. And I think, you know, in New Age thought, Eastern ideas like meditation have had a big influence. And then, you know, things that come out of India, like the chakra system, obviously has had a huge influence on us in the New Age and Wicca community. And, you know, I'm grateful for all those influences, because I think that those things are, they've really helped a lot of people. Yoga comes out of India. Again, super helpful. I love doing yoga. So, I mean, obviously there's like Eastern influences as well in my practice. Other than that, I do like learning about religions, even if I don't necessarily agree with them. And I think it's good to know about religions, because then you know what people think, or you have a basis to know sort of maybe where they're coming from. I mean, everyone's going to take their own religion differently anyway, but you have a basis and you can have a conversation. And I think that's important. So that's how I feel about that particular question, or my answer to that question. Number 17 says, how would you introduce spirituality to children? Would you pass on your book to your children? I guess like your Book of Shadows. Well, first of all, I gotta work on my Book of Shadows to be able to pass it on to anybody. But for passing it on to children, I think can be a complicated thing, because, well, I think it's different when, like, my kids are actually my stepchildren, so something like teaching spirituality is the responsibility of the children's parents, rather than my responsibility. Certainly, you know, if my kids were to ever ask me questions, I'm going to answer them honestly and openly and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I also think kids have to decide what they want to do. I personally think that I want children to know about religions and spirituality. I think if you're being raised in whatever faith it is, that you obviously know about that faith, but I think it's also important to educate them about other people's faiths as well. So again, you're not scared of people that have different beliefs, or you know where they're coming from. You have some semblance of education, like, you know, not to, you know, especially in a world with so much prejudice going on right now, I think it's really important that we educate each other on, you know, what do people actually believe, you know, instead of just, you know, propaganda that you see sometimes in the media. So I think it's important to teach kids about things so they know, but at the end of the day, when they're adults, they're going to decide what's right for them anyway. And that's why I would never want to push one particular philosophy or system on a child. I think, you know, teaching them some basic, you know, morality, of course, is super important, and demonstrating that to them is super important. And talking to them when they have questions and answering as honest as you can is super important. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to figure out what's going to work for them, and it's their path, and they're going to have to choose it. So that's my thoughts on that. And then number 18 says, funeral rites. How would you like your remains to be deposited? I want to be cremated. I don't like the idea of rotting in a box, but I do like the idea of gravestones. I love gravestones. So I would like to be cremated. I would really like to get someone to make an urn, or maybe I can make the urn and design the beautiful urn, and then have a gravesite at a beautiful cemetery, and have a really nice headstone that I would design. Now, this may be morbid, but I'm like, I want to design all the things because I'm an artist and I want to make it look pretty. So that's what I want for myself personally. I would love to like arrange things so I have everything kind of paid for ahead of time, so people would just show up. I'd love to have just like a ceremony of some kind, maybe Wiccan, but maybe sort of more generally spiritual, and then have a party, and then they can bury me, and that's really all I want. So anyway, those are my answers to the YouTube Pagan Challenge. I'd love to hear yours. If you're doing the YouTube Pagan Challenge, please let me know. Maybe put a link, or let me know what your channel name is, and I'll go and watch it. I find watching other people's answers fascinating as well. So like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.